In this vid, I'm going to be reviewing a deck with one of my favorite Pokemon cards in it, Vileplume. Vileplume puts your opponent and yourself under a trainer lock, which makes it very difficult to work around. While most Vileplume decks that I've seen run Mew Prime as well as a variety of other techs, this Vileplume deck by Raypokemonmaster goes for what he calls the Poison Lock. It features Crobat Prime as well as a few other techs in order to utilize that trainer lock. He's got some really cool ideas in here that I think should be shared. Your starters in this deck are 4 Cleffa. I'm a little worried with that many Cleffa you're really going to run into a lot of donk situations, so I would reduce that to 1, maybe 2 Cleffa, and also throw in 1 Tyrogue so that you have the potential of getting the donk as well. The big Pokemon in this deck is Vileplume. Vileplume is going to set up that trainer lock to really slow down and hopefully disrupt your opponent. I would run a 2-2-2 line of Vileplume, or even a 3-2-2 or 3-2-3 line. And the reasons why I'm considering running 3 basic Oddish is that with Yon Mega sniping for 40, you really run the risk of losing your Oddishes before they become a Vileplume. I also recommend running 2 Gloom, regardless of whatever other line you decide to run, just in case 1 Gloom is prized and you're having a hard time getting into that rare candy. You just really want to set this Vileplume up as fast as possible, so having a good, strong Vileplume line is going to be very helpful. You can always get rid of the extra Vileplumes later with your Sage or Juniper. Your main attacker in this deck is probably going to be your Crobat. Severe Poison does 4 damage counters in between turns rather than the typical 1. Without being able to use your switch, this can really hurt your opponent. And being that Crobat has a free retreat, it can easily run to the bench and put up a Mismagius to Poltergeist to do more damage for those extra trainers that your opponent has in his or her hand. You can also use Crobat's Skill Dive to knock off baby Pokemon, or if you really need to, but I hope you wouldn't, use Mismagius' Sleeping Spell to put your opponent possibly to sleep. Your Crobat line is pretty strong. You run a 3-3-3 line, although I think you'd probably be safe going down to 3-2-3, but again, that's your decision. Your Mismagius, you just run a 1-1 line. I would recommend running a 2-2 line, just because this can be a very strong attacker. Crobat can do great with poison, but if your opponent is running a lot of free retreaters, it's not going to hit as hard as you would hope for. So you're really going to want to increase the Mismagius line just to deal a little more damage. To make room for those extra Mismagius, I would recommend dropping your 2-2 line of Hypno. Its Pokepower Sleep Pendulum can possibly put your opponent's Pokemon to sleep, but it relies on a coin flip. Its attack Psychic Shot just isn't very strong. It only does 30 and does 10 damage to one of the bench Pokemon. While if you can put your opponent to sleep and get it to stay asleep, obviously that would mean it can't retreat even if it has a free retreat cost, and if you have the Vileplume up, obviously it couldn't retreat with the switch. I just don't think it's a solid enough card to have in here, and I would just really think that the Mismagius would help you out more. You run 8 Psychic Energy in the deck, which I think is a perfect number. This is a pretty low energy cost deck. The biggest attack you have is Mismagius' Poltergeist for 1 Psychic and 1 Colorless. You might want to consider possibly running a rescue or 2, just in case you have issues getting your Vileplume up. You can always rescue a Gloom before he becomes a Vileplume, just in case he's reversaled or catchered up. You run 2 trainers in the deck in order to get that Vileplume out as fast as possible. 4 Rare Candy and 2 Communication. I would reduce your Rare Candy to 3, and then increase your Communication to 3. I think 6 trainers in the deck is a solid number, and having 3 evenly split, I think increases the chance that you'll be able to get what you need. You run the maxed out line of 4 Collector, which I think is perfect, especially if you can increase that line of communication. You should be able to have a Pokemon Collector in your hand first, possibly second turn, and then be able to communicate the cards in that you need to get that Vileplume out. You also max out your line of Sage, which I think is great. This allows you to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose any 2, and then discard the rest. This can be great either beginning game or late game. Late game, you can go ahead and discard the trainers that are just, piling up in the deck. Or in an early game, you can, toss anything else and hopefully Sage into the Rare Candy and the Vileplume. You run 4 Juniper, which I think is a little too many. I like Juniper so you can throw away those trainers when you don't need them anymore, but I'm worried that with 4, you're really going to run the risk of decking yourself. So I would recommend possibly just running 2, and that should be more than enough to help you get the hands that you need. You run 1 Flower Shop as your recovery card, which I think is perfect. I would also recommend throwing in 1 Twins in case you're running behind on prizes. Since Oddish only has 40 HP and you're going to run into a lot of Young Mega decks, there's a good chance that Young Mega is going to be able to take out an Oddish or 2 before you can get set up. That's where the Twins is really going to come in handy. You run 4 Elm to search out for evolution cards. I think this is perfect because once Vileplume is up, you're really going to need a good search engine. You only run 2 Professor Oak's New Theory to refresh your hand. I would recommend increasing that to 3, possibly 4, and to make room for that, I would drop the Seekers from your deck. I really don't see you using the Seekers that often in this deck, and being able to replay those really fast. I like Seeker more in decks that can utilize basics, like Pachirisu and Shaman, and be able to reuse those Poke Powers. Seeker, I just don't see being very helpful in this deck, so maybe include 1, possibly 2 if you really think you're going to be scooping up your Crobat Primes, because that's your highest HP Pokemon, and the one that's most likely to be able to withstand a few hits. Those are all the suggestions I have. I really like this twist on the typical Vileplume deck. I'm used to seeing Vileplume Mew combinations with Muck, Mismagius, Crobats, a little bit of everything. So I really like that this is just more of a Vileplume on the bench, and I'm actually going to attack you with real Pokemon rather than attacking with Mew and Lost Zone Pokemon. So, like I said, I think it's a really interesting idea, and it's really cool to see something different. So if you'd like your deck reviewed, just PM me your list and let me know whether you'd like to be featured in a deck review, which, if you're chosen, will be going live in probably 3 or more weeks, or if you would like immediate feedback via a blog review. Regardless, if you submit your deck, you will be getting a blog review. It'll just take a little while to get them up. Thanks for watching!